Okay, hi Danielle, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you doing?
Doing great, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure.
Nice to have you here. So I was looking over your bio, and there does seem to be a reoccurring theme of medievalness, if that's a word.
Yes, sure. It is now.
Okay. Tell me why you're so into medieval stuff.
I mean, I think I got into it through Disney. That's really the answer. People want a more sophisticated answer, but it was really Disney. I loved Sleeping Beauty. I loved Robin Hood. And those stories are so timeless that we keep retelling them. And so those caught my imagination. And then when I got to university, I realized that you could make a career out of just learning about the Middle Ages. And so I was hooked. I'm really interested to see and look at the way people dealt with all of the issues that they had at that time and compare it to how we deal with our issues today. So I love this time period. I've always loved it, and it's just caught my imagination since the beginning.
Well, just so that everybody understands, what years were the Middle Ages or the medieval period?
That's a really good question because it is in debate. It depends on what you're using as your definition. So for me, I want to have some neat dates. So I go between 500 and 1500. So roughly the the end of the Roman Empire, or the way it's receded from most of Northern Europe, because that's where I spend most of my time when I'm researching, and the Protestant Reformation, so around 500 to 1500. So this is the time of Vikings and knights and castles. That whole 1,000-year period is the Middle Ages.
Okay, would Henry VIII be part of that time period?
Not by my definition, but by some people's definitions. So some people will add the Tudors to the end because you don't want to miss out on such a great story. But for me, Henry VIII is a little bit too late.
Okay, and Shakespeare would be too late.
Yeah, Shakespeare is after that. So yeah, a little bit too late. Although I've spent a lot of time with Shakespeare and his works, and I love that as well. I just don't count it as being medieval.
Okay, King James.
King James is even later.
Even later.
So
My timeline's
Shakespeare
way off. Yeah. Okay.
Shakespeare worked for Elizabeth the First, and then James was the successor. So Shakespeare also did plays for James the First, but he's even later than Elizabeth.
Okay, Charles the First?
Even later.
Even later.
Charles the First was the son of James the
Well,
First.
see,
So
obviously I stopped studying when I got back to about 1600. That was it. That was as early as I went.
yeah, that's pretty common.
Okay. When you were studying, or while you were studying the medieval ages, making comparisons to today's world, did you find more difference or more similarity?
Definitely more similarities. Like there are always going to be cultural differences, but there are cultural differences between, North Americans and Europeans now, even writ large, and then different cultures, different countries, that kind of stuff. So there are cultural differences, but human beings I found are the same. The things we want, the things we need, the things we hope for, things we love and hate, all of these things are really similar. So it becomes a matter of the difference being culture, what's available to you and what's not, and what people love in a community and what they don't. But human beings are so consistent over time. You can read something from the Middle Ages or read something from ancient Greece, for example, or ancient China, and it's so familiar to us. It's so relatable to us today. And that's the beauty of history for me anyway.
Did you find that it was kind of a grueling life for most people back then?
I mean, a grueling life means not having appliances for me anyway, not having
I
central
suppose
heating or air
it's a
conditioning,
matter of perspective.
right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But what I found is that if you went back in time and you talked to people, most people are not complaining about their lives more than people today are. I mean, today we have central heating and people are still complaining about being cold outside. So when it's your life, it's all you have to compare it to. If they compare their lives to our lives, of course theirs would look terrible, but they're comparing it to each other's, right? When they're living at that time. And so, do I want to live back then? No, I absolutely don't. But I think those people saw it as just normal. And so they went through their lives with joy and with laughter, as well as with sadness or difficulty. So it depends on, yeah, where you are and what your perspective is. I don't want to live back then, but I think those people, we need to expect that they also had the sort of joy in everyday life that we do. It's just a different time and place.
Well, I always thought that if I had a time machine and went back in time to even as recent as the Victorian era.
Yeah.
The one thing I would have to bring with me would be like a case of penicillin.
Yes.
You know, because the diseases that were running around in those days were unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of those diseases, like the Black Death even, they're caused by bacteria. And so when you don't have antibiotics to get rid of that bacteria, it's devastating. And so the rise of antibiotics was just a massive game changer. I don't think people realize what a big deal it is. But yeah, I would not want to go back then without having my antibiotics with me. Definitely not.
So your book is called Chivalry and Courtesy, Medieval Manners for a Modern World. Manners as in M-A-N-N-E-R, not O-R.
Yes.
So give us a couple of examples.
I think that the easiest place to access it when it comes to manners is at the table. And so that's where I start the book, is talking about how to eat. And I think if you look at just about any medieval media, like you watch something in the movies or on TV or something like that, people are just disgusting and they're just making a mess of their faces and hands and throwing stuff on the floor. But if you actually read stuff that people wrote in the Middle Ages about manners, and the best place to look for this is teaching children, so manuals that you be teaching to children. It's saying things like, don't wipe your face on your sleeve, don't blow your nose at the table, don't put your elbows on the table, don't make any bodily noises at the table, don't do any personal grooming in front of other people. And that stuff is so familiar. It's the same stuff that we teach our children today. And so I think that there's this misconception that people were more disgusting back in the day because they lived before we do, but it's really similar. The things that people like I was saying before, and enjoy or don't like. And a lot of those things you can see at the dinner table. So we are very lucky to have sources like these manners books for children that tell you, don't put your elbows on the table and don't take such a big bite that you can't speak. Like, don't talk with your mouth full. I think it makes this time more familiar to us when we look at sources like this.
Why do you think that, and I'm going to blame Hollywood, why do you think Hollywood portrayed, and even, I know you said Henry VIII was a little late, but even the stereotypes of Henry VIII with the turkey leg, eating like a complete pig. Why do you think they did that if it really wasn't true?
Well, there's a few reasons for this. And one of them is right after the Middle Ages, people already started to say that it was a terrible time. And that was to make themselves look better. So when I talked about my cutoff being sort of the Protestant Reformation, this is because it was a massive deal. And when you had more Protestants and more power in Europe, I mean, people weren't Protestant before, right after 1500, all of a sudden people are saying that everything Catholic is bad. And if the whole Middle Ages is Catholic, then the whole Middle Ages gets painted as superstitious and bad and backwards. So this is something that's been happening for, 500 years. People have been saying bad things about the Middle Ages. So there's that. And then the other part of it is we like to think of human progress as being a straight line, so that we are the pinnacle of evolution. So it makes us look good to look back and make these people look bad. So even though progress is wiggly line, it's not a straight line, it does make us look better to make these people, imagine these people as being more dirty, as being more ill-mannered, because then you can look at us and say, oh, we are just this much more amazing, So it really has to do with making us feel good, and also just a huge amount of propaganda that started really right after the Middle Ages to make it look bad, so that the Protestant Reformation would look good and make people look like they were more rational and more civilized. So it's been something that's been around for a very long time. And I think the reasons are the same as they are today. It just makes us look good to make them look bad.
Well, okay. That's a great answer.
It is the truth.
Yeah.
But it's not a comfortable answer, I don't think, but it is the truth.
Well, I think that could be applied to almost any generation.
Yeah.
Except lately it's been going in reverse, at least for people my age, where we're looking at kids, glued to an iPhone and thinking, well, when we grew up, we had to go outside and play.
Yeah.
And we thought that was better. We're looking at this as sort of, oh my God, what's happened, right? So it's sort of the opposite.
Well, that's really familiar as well. Like if you look back to Roman writings, and I'm thinking of Juvenal, for example, he says kids these days, they're the worst. They never listen.
Oh,
Like they're
okay.
so much worse than we were. So even that is something that people have been doing for thousands of years, is saying kids these days, they're the worst.
Oh, that's funny. I
Yeah.
think that's great.
Yeah.
So you also, as well as being an author, you also have a podcast called the Medieval Podcast. So what do you talk about other than
Oh,
this, right?
just the Middle Ages, but I only am interested in the cool bits of the Middle Ages. So the things I talk about, I interview experts. So because I've been in this field a long time, I know the people who are at the top of their fields when it comes to all sorts of aspects of the Middle Ages. So I've had people on to talk about pigs, to talk about laundry. I've had people on to talk about important things like religion, but also things like sex and relationships that might be, a more fun topic. Things like that. I've talked about all aspects of the Middle Ages because I really think that to get to know a culture, to get to know the past, we should be thinking about these people in human terms and what they were thinking about on the day to day, which is things like relationships and laundry and how long it's going to take me to cook this side of beef, that kind of stuff. So my podcast really focuses on that human element and hopefully makes it accessible to people and gives them a way into history that is not intimidating, that's not based on big old dusty tomes. And that really is the point of all my work, is to get people interested in it by helping them relate to it on a more personal level.
We've got just about a minute and a half left, so I want to get your other books in. You've got How to Live Like a Monk, Life in Medieval Europe, and the 5-Minute Medievalist.
Yes.
Quickly, How to Live Like a Monk. So that's what, vow of celibacy, vow of chastity?
Yes. So the major difference is I have a book called How to Live Like a Monk, not How to Be a Monk, because I don't think most people want to be monks because you are taking vows of celibacy, poverty, chastity, and obedience. And nobody wants to do that. But the way that monks lived in their interaction with each other, their interaction with green space, the way that they built their lives, it's really familiar to us in all of the wellness writing that we have. And then this book also brings together the research around psychology and wellness that shows that some of the ways that monks lived are actually really healthy. So it is a book that tells you about history and teaches you about monks and how they lived, because monks were a really important part of history, but also brings it together with modern science, modern psychology, and shows you how to live well. So it's a book that straddles many things, but it's hopefully cute and fun, and one that will teach people something about their own lives or about history, or both.
Okay. Is the book Chivalry and Courtesy, is that out now?
Yes, it's out now. It's available all over the place. The major bookstores, the minor bookstores, you can find it just about anywhere.
Okay, last question. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Yes, my website is daniellecybulskie.com. And I know that it's hard to spell. So if you're looking for me on social media, you can look for me at 5min Medievalist, if that's easier. That will help you find me on Google, or you can just go straight to daniellecybulskie.com.
Okay, we'll put it up on the screen so people
Thank you.
can spell it properly. Thank you for coming on the show. This was enlightening. And best of luck with your work and everything you're doing.
Thank you. It was so nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on the show.